Do you remember? Those heavy proton packs weighing down on their shoulders? Those streams of light piercing through the New York City night? And that immortal call. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters. The year was 1984. A golden age for American entertainment cinema. Among the blockbusters of action heroes and space adventures, one film arrived that nobody quite expected: a perfect blend of comedy, science fiction, and just the right touch of supernatural horror, directed by Ivan Reitman. With a screenplay by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, Ghostbusters wasn't just another summer movie. It was a cultural phenomenon that captured the imagination of an entire generation. The numbers tell part of the story: over $280 million worldwide, making it one of the highest-grossing comedies of all time. Ray Parker Jr.'s theme song became an instant classic, climbing to #1 on the Billboard charts. But numbers alone can't capture what Ghostbusters truly meant. This was the film that gave us Slimer, the gluttonous green ghost, the stay-puffed marshmallow man, perhaps cinema's most adorable apocalyptic threat. Catchphrases that became part of everyday language. I ain't afraid of no ghost. We came. We saw. We kicked its ass. For children of the 80s, Ghostbusters wasn't just entertainment. It was a defining piece of childhood. The film proved that scientists could be heroes, that humor and horror could dance together, and that even the paranormal could be approached with wit and entrepreneurial spirit. At the heart of this phenomenon stood an ensemble cast that felt less like actors playing roles and more like real people you'd want to know. Bill Murray as Peter Venkman, the wisecracking, harming parapsychologist. Dan Aykroyd as Ray Stantz, the true believer with childlike wonder. Harold Ramis as Egon Spengler, the brilliant, deadpan scientist. Ernie Hudson as Winston Zeddemore, the everyman who joined for the paycheck but stayed for the mission. Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett, the unwitting portal to another dimension. Rick Moranis as Louis Tully, the lovably awkward accountant turned keymaster. Annie Potts as Janine Melnitz, the no-nonsense secretary with a heart of gold. William Atherton as Walter Peck, the bureaucratic antagonist everyone loved to hate. But that was 40 years ago. 4 decades have passed since those proton streams first lit up movie screens. Careers have risen and fallen. Lives have changed in ways both triumphant and tragic. Some have ascended to legendary status. Others stepped away from the spotlight entirely. And sadly, some are no longer with us. So where are they now? Let's begin with the man at the center of it all. The smooth-talking, rule-breaking Peter Venkman. Bill Murray didn't just play Venkman, he was Venkman. That sardonic wit, the barely concealed chaos, the man who refuses to take anything too seriously, even when facing ancient Sumerian gods. After Ghostbusters, Murray's career took fascinating turns. While he returned for the 1989 sequel, he began gravitating toward more challenging roles. His performance in Lost in Translation earned him a Golden Globe and an Oscar nomination, revealing depths of melancholy beneath the comedic surface. Today, at 73, Bill Murray has transcended celebrity to become something like a folk hero. Stories of his unexpected appearances at random parties, his spontaneous adventures, have become legend. He's the movie star who might sit down at your table, steal a French fry, whisper, "No one will ever believe you," and disappear. He returned for Ghostbusters, Afterlife in 2021, reminding audiences why they fell in love with Peter Venkman. Murray's journey proves you can grow older without losing the spark that made you special. If Venkman brought the humor, Ray Stantz brought the heart. Needs some suspension work, and shocks, and brakes. It's only 4,800. That childlike excitement was pure Dan Aykroyd. Of all the Ghostbusters, he was the true believer, not just in the film, but in real life. He came from a family steeped in spiritualism. His great-grandfather was a renowned mystic. Ghost stories were family tradition. This was Aykroyd's passion project. The original concept featured John Belushi, but Belushi's tragic death in 1982 forced a complete reimagining. Working with Harold Ramis, Aykroyd transformed his cosmic vision into something intimate and accessible. After Ghostbusters, he continued successfully with films like Driving Miss Daisy, earning an Oscar nomination. He's remained Hollywood's most vocal advocate for the paranormal, hosting documentaries about UFOs and launching Crystal Head Vodka. And he's never let go of Ghostbusters. Now 72, Aykroyd served as producer on recent films, protecting the legacy while advocating for its continuation. He's the boy who believed in ghosts and convinced the world to believe with him. But belief alone doesn't catch ghosts. For that, you need the brilliant mind of Egon Spengler. I'm terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought, delivered without a smile. That was Harold Ramis's genius, playing it completely straight while chaos erupted around him. Ramis was the creative anchor of the entire production. He'd already written Animal House and co-written Stripes. When Aykroyd brought him the massive original script, Ramis saw the potential and helped focus it into the character-driven comedy we know. After Ghostbusters, Ramis's career evolved primarily behind the camera. He directed Caddyshack, National Lampoon's Vacation, and Groundhog Day, which transcended comedy to become a philosophical text about growth and redemption. Tragically, Harold Ramis passed away in 2014 at age 69. His death was felt deeply across the industry. Ghostbusters, Afterlife served as a loving tribute, making Egon the film's emotional center, a reminder that intelligence and dedication can be heroic. The original three formed a perfect triangle: humor, heart, and intellect. But they needed one more element, someone to ground them. If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say. Winston Zeddemore was different. He didn't have a PhD. He was there because he needed a job. That made him the audience surrogate, asking practical questions nobody else thought to ask. Ernie Hudson gave Winston dignity and warmth. That conversation in the Ecto-1, discussing biblical prophecy, revealed spiritual depth. Winston evolved from skeptic to believer through faith and experience. Hudson's role had been reduced from the original script, something he's discussed candidly. Despite this, he never let it diminish his performance, creating a character fans embraced completely. After Ghostbusters, Hudson worked consistently in dozens of films and TV shows: The Crow, Miss Congeniality, and more. He became an advocate for Winston's legacy and greater representation in film. Now, 78. Hudson returned for Ghostbusters, Afterlife, and remains active. His journey reflects resilience, taking a reduced role and making it unforgettable, reminding us that heroism doesn't require a PhD. While Winston kept the team grounded, Dana Barrett found herself unwillingly ascending. There is no Dana, only Zool. When Sigourney Weaver was cast, she was already a star from Alien. But Dana Barrett was different, a talented cellist whose life was invaded by supernatural forces. Weaver brought layers beyond typical damsel in distress territory. Before possession, Dana was smart, skeptical, Unimpressed by Venkman's charm, the possession sequences showcased her remarkable range, creating something genuinely unsettling in the midst of comedy. Ghostbusters demonstrated Weaver's versatility. After it, her career soared even higher, 3 Oscar nominations in 2 years for Aliens, Gorillas in the Mist, and Working Girl. She worked with the greatest directors and never got pigeonholed. The Avatar films brought her to new generations. Now 75. She's returned to Ghostbusters in recent films, still bringing that unique combination of intelligence, strength, and vulnerability. Her journey proves you can embrace franchise filmmaking while maintaining a diverse, challenging career. You can be both Ripley and Dana, both action hero and comedian. Speaking of transformation, Louis Tully went from accountant to keymaster. Okay, who brought the dog? Rick Moranis made Louis pure comic gold. Everything was perfectly calibrated. The ill-fitting suits, the tax shelter discussions, the complete social obliviousness. When demonic forces pursued him, he tried to negotiate. After Ghostbusters, Moranis became one of the 80s most bankable comedy stars. Little Shop of Horrors, Spaceballs, and especially Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which made him a household name. Then, in 1991, his wife passed away from cancer, suddenly a single father with 2 young children. Moranis faced a choice few in Hollywood make: career or family. He chose family. Moranis stepped away from acting in 1997, turning down role after role, including Ghostbusters, Afterlife. He focused entirely on raising his children. In a 2015 interview, he explained simply, "I'm a single parent, and I just found that it was too difficult to manage raising my kids and doing the traveling involved in making movies. No drama. Just a father making a choice." Now 70, Moranis recently agreed to appear in a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids reboot. His return was met with genuine joy from fans who'd missed his nerdy charm. Rick Moranis represents someone who walked away from fame on his own terms, who prioritized what mattered most, demonstrating courage more heroic than any proton pack. Meanwhile, the Ghostbusters headquarters had its own source of sass. Ghostbusters. What do you want? Annie Potts' Janine was tough, funny, no nonsense, and absolutely unimpressed by supernatural chaos. She wasn't just the secretary. She kept the business running while the boys chased ghosts. And she had style. Those glasses, that hair, those outfits. Janine looked like downtown New York attitude personified, and her delivery matched dry, sardonic, completely over everyone's nonsense. After Ghostbusters, Potts became a television mainstay. Designing Women ran for 7 seasons, earning Emmy nominations. She voiced Janine in the animated series for years, giving the character even more depth. Decades later, she found career resurgence in young Sheldon as the beloved Meemaw. Most delightfully, she returned for Ghostbusters, Afterlife, older but no less sharp. Still the backbone of the operation. Now 72, Annie Potts has worked consistently across 5 decades, proving that supporting roles, played with commitment and charisma, become just as memorable as leads. But every team needs opposition, and Ghostbusters found its antagonist in Walter Peck. Yes, it's true. This man has no dick. Murray's ad-libbed response became legendary, but William Atherton's performance made it work his indignant rage. his bureaucratic certainty, his conviction that he was the hero. Walter Peck was the villain you love to hate, not because he was evil, but because he was officious, arrogant, and dangerously convinced of his own righteousness. From his perspective, these were unlicensed individuals operating dangerous equipment. He was doing his job. Atherton played it perfectly, giving Peck just enough humanity to feel real while making him thoroughly unlikable. It wasn't his first time playing this type. In Die Hard, he was the sleazy reporter who endangered lives for a story. Atherton became Hollywood's go-to actor for antagonists who weren't villains but obstacles, bureaucrats, and authority figures who made life difficult through pettiness rather than genuine evil. Now 76. Atherton continues to work occasionally. He's embraced the legacy of his roles, appearing at conventions with humor and perspective. Walter Peck remains the reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters wield clipboards and regulations. Every story needs someone to overcome, and sometimes the most memorable villains think they're the heroes. 8 actors, 8 iconic characters, 1 unforgettable film. 40 years have passed since those proton streams first lit up the screen. Since we first heard that question, who you gonna call? The journeys these 8 individuals took tell us something profound about fame, choice, and unpredictable paths. Bill Murray ascended to living legend status, moving seamlessly between comedy and drama, between blockbusters and spontaneous adventures. Dan Aykroyd never stopped believing in ghosts, in the franchise he created, in the power of wonder. Harold Ramis left us too soon, but his legacy endures in every comedy that prioritizes character over punchlines. Egon Spengler lives on as a reminder that nerds can be heroes. Ernie Hudson kept showing up, kept working, kept bringing dignity to every role. Winston's everyman heroism reflected Hudson's own persistence. Sigourney Weaver proved you can do everything: action, drama, comedy, and never be limited by expectations or age. Rick Moranis made perhaps the most quietly heroic choice, walking away from fame to be present for his children, prioritizing love over recognition. Annie Potts demonstrated that supporting characters become just as beloved as leads when played with commitment and charisma. William Atherton embraced his niche as the antagonist we love to hate, creating memorable obstacles that made heroes prove themselves. Together, they created something that transcended its parts. Ghostbusters was a cultural touchstone, a piece of shared memory that continues to find new audiences with each generation. The magic wasn't just in special effects or one-liners. It was in the chemistry, the feeling that these were real people facing extraordinary circumstances. It was in the balance, never too scary for kids, never too silly for adults. When you watch the film today, what strikes you isn't how dated it feels, but how timeless. The core remains solid. The friendship, the courage, the idea that ordinary people can face down gods through teamwork, ingenuity, and determination. The franchise has continued. Sequels and reboots have tried to recapture that magic with varying success. Ghostbusters: Afterlife served as a love letter to the original, honoring what came before while passing the torch forward. But nothing quite matches that first film. Nothing captures that specific moment in 1984 when audiences found themselves delighted, scared, and thoroughly entertained. The actors scattered to their individual paths, but they carried pieces of that summer with them. Some achieved greater fame, some stepped away. One left us too soon, but they all contributed to something larger than themselves, a story that parents show their children, who will someday show their children, Time is merciless. It takes youth, beauty, and eventually life itself. Careers rise and fall. Fame fades. But some things endure. The joy of watching Ghostbusters for the first time. The laughter at Murray's sarcasm. The thrill of watching proton streams cross despite Egon's warnings. The sweetness of seeing this makeshift family succeed against impossible odds. These 8 actors gave us that. They gave us characters who felt real enough to care about, ridiculous enough to laugh at, heroic enough to cheer for. 40 years ago, they asked us a question. Who you gonna call? We answered then. We're still answering now. And the answer? Always. Is Ghostbusters. Because some heroes create stories that refuse to die, that live on in memory and laughter, that remind us why we fell in love with movies in the first place. The actors have aged, the world has changed, but the film remains a perfect snapshot of a moment when everything came together just right. Where are they now? Some in the spotlight, some in shadow, some beyond the veil. But in our memories, on our screens, they're forever running through New York streets with proton packs on their backs, forever facing the impossible with humor and heart. Who you gonna call?